Hello YouTube, this is Kolbot Forever bringing you an instruction video on how to use Auto Rush. We're going to start by opening up our character configuration for our rusher, and we're going to go down to about line 290 or so. This is for a paladin. It may vary if you use a sorceress or some other character, but it'll be a similar place. We're going to change Rushbot to true for our rusher, and the next step is to come down to the next line where it says wait for player count. I had issues with this one, even if I tried using the correct number. I would suggest you just use 0 and don't wait. But make sure you get your order correct when you start all your bots, especially if you're doing a lot of them. So this may seem confusing, but try to follow me here. You're going to start all of the bots except for the one who's going to make the actual games for your characters to be rushed in. In other words, there's going to be one character that you're going to set as D2 bot lead, and that character is going to be the rushee, not the rusher. And the reason, and this is, it seems backwards, but it's not. The reason for this is because the rushee needs to make the game, because otherwise the quest will be completed already if this character, the rusher, was to make the game. I hope that makes sense. If not, I'm going to show it a little bit more later so that you guys can kind of figure out what I'm talking about. Anyway, moving on, you can pick any of the quests that you want. It doesn't really matter. And then the last run, what that means is on line 302, it means where are you going to stop for the rush. For normal and nightmare, you're probably going to want Bale. For hell, you're probably going to want to put Anya, because unless you have a level 60, you can't get the Ancients quest and, of course, the Bale quest done. So that's it for the rusher. And then we're going to move on to one of the rushies, just as an example next. Okay, moving on to the rushie, and in this case the bumper for our rushie. And we need to make sure that our leader is correctly spelled. This is the leader's name in-game, or at least that's how I chose to do it. I also added this random quit interval. You don't need to do this, but I find that it helps alleviate some crashes if you do. So just make sure that you get your character name spelled correctly. You can use profile names if you prefer. You would need to change this to a 1 and then use the profile names. And you can also use like a quit list. That's what this is. If he quits, then everybody quits is how I have it set up, because that character is the rusher. And then come back down to the auto rush section of your rushee. This is line 304, 305, 306. We need to change it to true because this is still a rushee. And then for the bumper, which is what this character is, you're also going to do true. And if this was not a bumper, you would just put false for each of the rushies that is just a level 1 or whatever the case may be. And that's how you do the rushies. So if it's the rushie and not a bumper, it's true on line 304. And then on line 306, it will also be true if it's the bumper. Now these aren't necessary, but if you wanted to, you could run, well, you can change these configuration scripts. This is going to be located, this is the starter config.javascript. This is going to be in Kolbot, your base Kolbot folder, D2BS, Kolbot again, libs, then starter, and then if you go into starterconfig.js or JavaScript, you'll see some options here. This is not necessary, but if you want to do this, and I suggest that you do because it makes it easier to see what's going on if you're doing lots of characters. If you're just doing one, this probably isn't necessary or needed, but basically what's going to happen is they're going to join channel, and you can choose whichever channel you want, and they're going to let you know that they're joining the game. And I like to do this because I was running 6 rushies and 1 rusher, and to see them all saying and entering games and leaving that channel just made it easier for me. So if you want to do that, you can, and this is where you do it. And you can see how I have it set up. I have it set up as join channel OP Dark Vigilante, joining game, and then I have announce games on true. You don't have to do that, but if you want to, you can. And then they can say a custom message if you want to, whatever you like. And then don't forget to click File Save when you're done. Okay, second to the last step, we have another configuration file we want to edit. This is just to make sure that all the characters will actually join into the proper character's game. So remember, as I said before, the rushee who's going to make the games is going to be the leader in this particular case, and then everybody else, including the rusher is going to be a follower. It's a little confusing, but if you've done rushes before, you understand that you need the person who's going to be rushed, who doesn't have the quest completed already, to make the game. And that's all we're doing here. So in order to do that, we need to go into our Kolbot folder, D2BS, Kolbot, libs, systems, follow, and then follow config.js, and then you're going to see this. Now mine's already set up, and I'm going to explain how I have it set up. The easiest thing to do is set it as all, as you see here. That means that all characters will join this character right here when set as followers. Now if you wanted to do individual ones, you could do that by making each one with their profile name, not their character name, separated by a comma and quotation marks. So let me give you an example. You put a comma, space, quotation mark, dark, pal. Let's say that was my profile name, not my account, not my character name. Make sure you get that right, or this will not work. So if you want to do that, you could do that for each profile instead of doing all. If you want to do just one at a time, you can. Personally, I find all works fine. I don't tend to use follow, D2bot follow very often, so I find that that works just fine. And then this, again, is your, just to be perfectly clear, this is your rushee who's making the game, who does not have all their quests completed, so that the rusher can bring the rest of your characters through the rush. Last step, we're going to be looking at the profiles in d2bot.exe. Okay, so this should be your final step, but I failed to mention something before. Before you go through all of this, I strongly recommend making your characters that you're going to rush before you go through all this, so that you have all the names and everything set up. You could do this before that, but I find it just to be easier to do it that way instead. So let's take a look at our rusher versus our rushee. So here is my rusher, and you'll notice it's set as d2bot follow and not set as lead. The reason for this is we need it to follow in the rushee, as I mentioned before, into the game that he's making, or she, and that way they will be able to actually complete the quest. So that's what I meant by that a few times before, and that's all you need to do is just set it as d2bot follow for your rusher and all of your rushies except for the rushee who's going to be making the games so that you can complete the quest. Now let's take a look at our rushee who's going to be making the games, and you're just going to be setting that particular character as d2bot lead. Now all these other characters, except for this top one because I didn't do that because I already had that character rushed, are going to be rushed. So this one is the rusher, these are all rushies. The way I would suggest you start this is start this one last. So this is the one that's going to create the game. Start all of these first, and they will sit there in the channel the way I showed you, and they will wait for the rushee, who's going to make the game, to show up, create the game, and then they'll all join in after. That's what I had success with, and that's what I'm going to recommend you do as well, especially if you're going to do lots of characters like I did here. And that concludes that. If you want to, I will include two different sets of videos, one that includes the demo and one that doesn't, if you don't have any interest in seeing the demo and my opinions and the issues that I had. Then you can skip that and go through it yourself. I highly recommend that you watch that video. I'll put a link down in the description. Like I said, I'll do separate and together, so however you like that. If you guys haven't subscribed, please do so already. These videos take forever to make. I'd really appreciate a subscription, and I hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you next time. Hello YouTube, this is Kolbot Forever bringing you the Rusher and Rushee script, and I'm going to talk about how I think it worked with 7 characters in total being in the game, and some errors that it had, and some suggestions for you so that you don't have the same problems that I did as I went through this process, so that you'll have an easier time with this. As you can see here, all the characters party up except for one. I've checked the config multiple times and the settings, and can't find anything wrong. They all look exactly the same for each one. So I'm not sure why this one character on the bottom right will not party without me manually doing it, but it won't, so keep that in mind. If you're doing just one character, that may not be the case. However, if you're doing multiple characters like this, you may need to run one manually like I did. On that bottom right, I have to run that manually or else it would not have worked. And this happened through normal, nightmare, and in hell mode as well, so something to keep in mind. You'll notice that it clicks on the same cairn stone quite a few times. Solo play also does this. Probably 3 or 4 times would probably be good for desync or lag, but it takes quite a while to do it. Do not click trying to get it to work yourself. You can cause it to crash, as you'll see later in the video. Just let it be, just like everything with Kolbot, just let it be, and unless something catastrophic is happening, don't mess with it. In Norm, Izu will work just fine, but in Nightmare and Hell, we did not get the quest. So don't count on it getting the quest for you either. Seems to be that it's too far away. It also doesn't click on the angel's soul after it dies either. It just goes right back to town, which doesn't work because in order to complete the quest, I believe you have to talk to the angel. So either way, it's not working, and it's something to keep in mind. Personally, I don't think it's that big of a deal because you can just go back and do this later if you need it. So, but it is something to note. It is something we could improve if somebody has the time or expertise to fix it. This is another point of contention. When you use the give all waypoints feature, what ends up happening is you crash. And the reason for this is number one, because I'm clicking on the screen, but also number two, it crashes by itself because it can't actually get in the portal, or if it does get in the portal and nobody else shows up, it causes it to crash. So keep that in mind. I would recommend turning off the give all waypoints feature, except for hell mode, because in hell mode you're not going to be able to do ancients and Bale anyway, unless you have a level 60. If you do have a level 60 and you're going to do that, I would recommend turning it off even still. It seems to be that however it's programmed, it doesn't understand that you should just skip this. Eventually the Paladin will skip it, which is at the worst possible time because the crash delay on Kolbot is waiting on that one character. And so what ends up happening is he starts to go through Bale when the bumper is not ready to go now, because the bumper is the one that crashed in this instance. So keep this in mind. I had to manually get through this by pausing the Paladin in the throne room and then relogging in, letting the game log in, and then getting the bumper into position and into the Bale throne room, and then finally into the World's Stone Keep to defeat Bale in both Nightmare and in Hell. So if you don't do this, you may run into a problem if you're running those waypoint town portals, so I would recommend turning them off for normal and nightmare at least. And as you can see, it completed Nightmare. Not all of them registered, as I said before, because we have an error with one of them. This is just make sure that whoever your leader is, you need to make sure that you tell it to go to the next difficulty each time you do this, or else it will rejoin the same difficulty. And then inside of your character config, you want to make sure that you change your last spot to, for in this case, I'm going to do Anya. And the reason is because Anya is before Ancients and Bale. We don't have a level 60, so basically that's what we need to do. So just thought I'd mention it. Make sure you guys understand that you should do that. As you can see, we're having issues with magic commands here. We ended up skipping this quest, not by choice, but the bot just basically moved on after I tried to fix it a couple of times, gave myself a few more crashes in the process, and just because the magic commands in the Hammerden. This is not a very strong Hammerden either. I'm missing quite a bit of gear that would make him more efficient, as I'm just finding it myself. So keep that in mind and understand that this could happen to you too, and maybe a sorceress would be a better choice if she's super strong and well geared. Or just a really well geared paladin, either way. And this is just an instance of me clicking on the screen trying to get the bot to hurry up. Don't recommend it, caused a crash, my fault. I think it probably would have been fine, although didn't really kill all those witches that are shooting at him in the background, so there's a pretty strong chance that it may not have worked anyway because the barbarian would have had to go in there at level 1, and if anything so much as breathed on him, he would have died. So other than that, I think it went pretty well, and we got mostly what we needed in the end. So in conclusion, number 1 and number 7 are basically the same, with the 6th follower or the 7th character. It didn't work even after I checked the configs. Everything is set, as far as I can tell, perfectly. It still didn't work. I had to manually run that through. It may or may not happen to you if you run just 1 instead of 6 or 7 or 8, but I'm not really sure, but it is something to think about. Clicking without pressing the pause key will cause a crash, and did multiple times for me as I was trying to fix certain errors as I was going along. Unfortunate, but still true. The Cairn stones are a little slow. As you can see, he clicks on it about 5 to 10 times. I can't tell exactly how much, but it's quite a few times. It wastes a lot of time, but it does still get through it. Just let it be. I would turn off waypoints for normal and nightmare, given the fact that it tends to crash if you don't. Level 1 characters cannot go to the Worldstone Keep because they cannot complete the Ancients quest, and the way the bot is set up, it waits for everybody to get the waypoint before it moves on. After a certain amount of time, it will time out and move on, but not before your bumper crashes, so I recommend turning that off. Izzle didn't work 2/3 of the time. Nightmare and Hell, it didn't work. I didn't show normal, but it did actually work. And then Nightmare and Hell, as you can see, it did not work. Make sure you turn off Chicken. Chicken is normally set to about 30%. If you set it to 0 in your character config, it will not activate and you will just die in the game. When you're rushing, that's a lot better. So don't make the mistake I did of forgetting to do that with one of your characters. Make sure you set it to 0. And then overall, I still think it's a great bot. It's way better than most of the rushing scripts I've seen before. It's still very imperfect. There's a lot of improvements that could be made, but overall I still think it's really good and you should try it yourself. I hope you guys have a good one. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.